Right, so this dream here is the 24th of the 11th, 2025. So about 4 months ago, roughly, very, very roughly, as to when this one happened. Now, this is a really full-on dream. There's loads and loads and loads of detail here. Links into quite a few of my other dreams, actually. And so this will probably take quite a while to go through. Yeah, quite a while to go through, I imagine. There is a sort of a conclusion that I have to a certain extent, but I think there's actually quite a lot more to it. I just don't quite have the understanding on yet. But again, we'll see how we go. As I said, I'll go with my current sort of thoughts on this. And if I ever find I get some revelation that's quite extreme, or maybe I will reshoot it. But at the moment, I want to get out there this dream because there's a lot of stuff going on. And I've actually had another dream but I haven't actually even logged in this book. So it's been a bit more recent that has got some very similar elements to this. And so I kind of want to put them side by side. So we'll just have to see how this goes. Big introduction, but here we go. So as I've put here, I've tried to put this in a logical order because my notes were a bit all over the place as I'd remembered everything, like I wake up in the middle of the night and I write this dream down on my phone. It was kind of a bit all over the place because quite often I'll remember the last part first and then I'll kind of work my way back with what I remember. So I've tried to put this in a somewhat logical order. And it may well be have been across two different dreams, but they seem very connected. So I'll just sort of roll them all in together. So anyway, so what I remember, I was actually working for the police force that had actually been not so much infiltrated by, let's say, Arabic people. So Arabic nations, let's say, people from those kind of nations. It had not so much been infiltrated by them, but that there was more like there was sort of people that were being hidden within the police force. I'll try and make that make sense a little bit, in that they were hired, obviously, to be police officers, but they were hiding somewhat within the police force because there was a problem with them later on. Okay, so as they were all wearing sort of SWAT gear, that sort of style gear, where they've got most of their face covered but just their eyes, so they've got their face and most of their facially was covered, and that sort of gear, and so they couldn't really be identified. As mentioned, I had noticed a group of these Arab guys that were. I was just very suspicious of their intent. And I pointed them out actually to a colleague who actually, when I mentioned to him, these guys are looking a little bit shifty. There's something not quite right about them. And he actually agreed and actually swapped them out of whatever they were due to do. He pulled them out of that to do something different. And he replaced them with a couple of white guys specifically. Okay, so I was I was pouring this colleague, a glass of water apparently, and I was kind of like looking out the corner of my eyes and sort of keeping an eye on these other guys and what they're up to. And this is specifically these Arab guys who, again, they were part of the police force because they were still in the area. And then I started to be very suspicious actually about these white guys that had sort of been brought in and replacing them. I was very suspicious of them as well, thinking that one of them was actually somehow connected by a string of murders that had been going on, some sort of killings that were happening, and that the actual serial killer that we were looking for was maybe within the police force itself. So I've put here, there was this serial killer, and I was the detective who was working on gathering evidence and catching the killer. And I had a feeling that there was something going on with within the police force, that there was specifically some crooked cops, and there were some plans being made. So it's almost like there was something going on in the police force that wasn't quite right. I put up here, I felt like there was this undercurrent of this being some sort of a conspiracy that was beneath the surface. And I was basically investigating, because I'm this detective, trying to uncover what's going on here? Almost, like somebody, what's it called? Where you're a police officer and you're kind of the ones who prosecute police officers and you investigate their work. That wasn't my job, but I just had a feeling there was something I was really uncomfortable with. There was something going on between, as I said, it was a mixture. It was these Arab guys that I was suspicious of initially, but then the ones who replaced them, these white guys, I was suspicious of them as well. So there was something going on there that I just felt like there was maybe some sort of a cover up or something going on. And I kind of opened this up a little bit more in a minute anyway, because I was trying to uncover it, trying to investigate. I put, and this could relate to a later part in the dream, which we'll get to. So this serial killer, anyway, we felt that we may had actually previously had this guy in custody. So actually, maybe questioned him, arrested him or something like that. But we let this person go, I guess, due to a lack of evidence. But we were convinced that we had the right guy at the time, this is, and felt that he had help internally. So it was like police officers have somehow got this guy off, even though we were pretty sure it's the right guy. Okay, and they'd somehow, I don't know, done something, pulled some strings sort of thing, and this guy had got set free. So, and this was part of this corruption, or this kind of conspiracy, something like that I was trying to unearth. There seemed to be lots of fake evidence as well that was being presented. So I've put here, such as pictures of bodies covered in blood, but I felt that the guy was actually alive, that he was listed as being dead, this particular person. So this was to do with this serial killer, I guess. Something to do with one of his victims was listed as being dead, but it felt like the blood in the picture I was seeing looked like fake blood. It just wasn't convincing to me. And so I was basically using my work computer to run searches of suspects. But I put, really oddly, remember you doing word searches on documents. And so I was literally typing in a word and that it would take me to a certain document. And no, that's not what I'm looking for. And I was trying to find a way of getting the evidence I needed as to who this killer was. And what I realized was that the word search I was typing in on some sort of Bible thing. I was basically using the Bible for guidance on how to identify this serial killer. And I was sitting at, and I was sitting with an old, very, very old school friend called Benjamin. So not somebody I've ever dreamt anything about before. I did mention it actually, not that long ago actually. I mentioned, I had a dream, I remember, with, I said how names are important, and I mentioned I had Benjamin in a dream once. Obviously biblical name, and I was wondering, is that relevant? Well, this is the dream I was referring to actually, because it's the only time I believe that he's been in a dream. And he wasn't really a close friend, I wouldn't have said, not like your inner circle, but he was quite local to me, and we were friends more in like sixth form, I would have said, so like ages 16 to 18, that sort of time frame, probably before as well, but again, anyway, so he was kind of helping me with these searches. He was sitting next to me, and I remember we searched one word up on this. Again, we're going through the Bible and we're searching a word, and it just came up with way too many hits. It's a bit like, I don't know, putting in white guy, when you're searching for a suspect, and it would just bring up stacks, like, that was helpful. We need to narrow it down a lot more than that. So it was something like that, some sort of a word I'd used, that just had way too many hits, that it was completely useless. And this is where it gets really random here. Okay. I typed in the word or words, Roxy Music. So ROXY and then music, MUSIC. When I typed that in, I just got one hit. And that was like, right. That was what we needed to find exactly what I was looking for. That was like the key. I put in Roxy Music. Okay, I'll explain all this in a bit. Right, so I got one hit. I can't remember what I was typing. I can't remember when I typed that what it actually brought me to, but it seemed to set me on finding this killer, who I felt could be among us, as in the police force potentially. That there was this. other person that they'd freed who was a suspect. It was almost like the evidence was pointing to somebody who maybe they weren't the killer, and it was actually a bit of misdirection, you know, and it was actually within the police force, possibly. So the police got that person off because, you know, they knew it wasn't them, but all evidence was pointing to them, if that makes sense. Redirecting, if you see what I mean. I also remember a part where I was in a hotel with my wife, and I happened to be standing at the balcony, you know, looking out onto the street or the road below, and I saw this suspicious-looking guy who was looking directly up at me. It was very obvious he was looking at me, and he actually was one of the suspects that we were looking into, and he looked almost exactly like the crooked cop that's in Batman Dark Knight. So he's the guy who asks for falafel. There's a bit in there where he's basically extorting people for money all the time. Crooked cop, and he's the falafel guy. So he's got quite long hair, a little bit a bit overweight, middle-aged, let's say, roughly. This guy looked almost exactly like him, and I said it's really odd because, I mean, my dreams, when I've been recording these dreams, I'm sort of jumping here, there, and everywhere. But I mentioned here, it's really odd because I'd actually referenced that film in a previous one I'd written, only quite close to this one in the book. I can't remember what dream that would have been. But anyway, so I was concerned that given that this guy was a suspect of being a serial killer, and was also a crooked cop, that he could be on his way up to our room to kill us, almost like I'm investigating a crime that's maybe our investigation is heading me towards him as being prime suspect, and I'm gaining evidence that he's going to take me out, was what it looked like the plan was. So I kept watch, and I prevented my wife from actually going to sleep so that we had to stay awake. Okay. And when it was safe, we left the room. And it's really strange, but it then went to a part where I was at a record shop. So like CDs, records, DVDs, all that kind of stuff, which again, I've had quite a few different times. I've had it quite a few different times. I mean, the one that comes to mind is probably the one called Tarot. That's got a record shop in it. I think it's called Tarot. That's got a record shop in it. But yeah, in this one, so I went into the shop, and there was, again, this time, 3 white guys. So I think I mentioned 2 white guys earlier, didn't I? 3 white guys, and they were buying loads of CDs, but they were all like really, really girly CDs, and it was a bit suspicious. You know, it's kind of like, well, why are these guys buying these really girly CDs and stuff? And I put here, it may have been that we were actually being watched, and maybe my eyes sort of locked with them just for a moment, and they were kind of like, oh, they kind of panicked, and thought, oh, I think they've noticed who we are, and so they decided to break away somewhat, and then they just grabbed whatever was close to them and went to the till to pay for them. And so when I'm sort of standing next to them, I'm seeing them paying for these DVDs, I'm kind of looking at them thinking, why are you buying this girl band CD and this other one that's again like a kid's girl band or something like that? It just felt really suspicious, and it reminded me of that. Like, these guys are just, look, we've been caught here. Look, let's just abort, that kind of thing. That's what it kind of felt like. And also I use the example of a little bit like, when you see, you've got like a woman and a man that say who are doing the same thing, and then they'll just kiss each other, just so you're kind of like, oh, okay, fair enough. I thought you were sort of spying on me, but now you're kissing each other. Now I'm not suspicious, like you see in films all the time, to reduce suspicion. Anyway, so we were then, and then it went to a bit where I was driving with my wife, but she was the one who was driving, which doesn't make any sense because she doesn't drive. But I was just looking out the window. Again, looking out windows is, in dreams, quite often looking into future events, things that are yet to happen, prophetic, that kind of thing. And as I was looking out, I saw something really, really odd, and it was a really odd cloud formation. Again, this one points to a video called Angel Among Us. Okay? And that talks about really odd cloud formations. They kind of like, they look like a normal cloud, but it's like the outside, it's like they're superimposed, a bit like a sort of lower budget film where you kind of look at an explosion or something like that doesn't even look remotely real, and it kind of ruins the film for you. This was very similar. It was superimposed, and I thought there's something not quite right with those clouds. Well, again, the other video that I recorded this morning, I mentioned about how I watched a film called Nope, Nope, 2022 film, I believe. And I mentioned how in that Nahum 3 came up. Nahum 3 verses 6 is just quoted in the film, quite early on in the film. And how this morning I opened my Bible, ready to do my first video of the day, and I opened it up and literally cut it right on Nahum 3. And I thought, that's a little bit odd. 2,500 pages, and I cut it on the page that is what I saw yesterday, like last night. Let's say I watched that film last night, and I actually pointed out to my wife. I said, "Oh, it's Nahum 3:6." I said, "I wonder why they put a Bible quote on there. That's a bit strange." And then I opened my Bible, Nahum 6, and it's not like I've heavily bookmarked that to kind of open it on that page. Very, very random, and I just cut it sort of halfway roughly in the Bible, and I thought, right, I'll find out where I am, and then from there I'll get to where I need, because all the stuff I quoted for in the previous video was all which is called EL, all of that was all New Testament, so I'm a little bit of a way on actually from where Nahum is. Anyway, and in that film Nope, it's about them looking out over a big sort of like hilly region, and there's a cloud that doesn't move. Like they've got it all on camera, and there's loads of clouds that are all moving around, and there's one cloud that does not move, and this is where this UFO is kind of hiding in the clouds. Okay, so again, another connection. So I was just reading this over. I had a real drive to actually film this particular video, and I have had that kind of want to do it for a week or two now because of the message that comes, but perfect timing. I literally watched a film about a cloud formation where one cloud doesn't move. It's a very odd cloud formation, and perfect timing. Here we go. And I didn't obviously write that on here. I wrote, I have had another dream about a previous dream about cloud formations that was suspicious. So definitely watch that one. That's called Angel Among Us. That's again a really visual one. But while we're looking, so as I said, my wife's driving. We're driving in this long. I don't know if I say it, but it's almost like we're driving along a coast, and the coast and this road is completely straight, but we're kind of looking out. But there's lots of oddly placed landmarks. So what I saw was a huge building that looked like the Parthenon, in Greece, the one that's got loads and loads and loads of pillars, stacks and stacks of pillars, which is a temple, isn't it? I saw that there, which is really bizarre. And then I saw these other landmarks that just didn't fit. Like you wouldn't have that there. And then again, to throw out an example that I don't think was in it, but like the Taj Mahal, and it's next to the Parthenon, which is then next to Big Ben. It was these kind of things that were going past. And I was thinking, what's going on here? It's really confusing. And I think it was around about then that I woke up, actually, just after that. But what it actually, that specific part I just mentioned with all the odd landmarks, let's say, reminded me of the film Inception. And I've mentioned Inception before, but the film Inception, where they go into a dream world, and as they're in that dream world, they're constructing it from their imagination. And they have like the home they first lived in, and then there's something else, and there's something else, and there's something else, like places they've lived in, which were obviously geographically all in different places, but they've been constructed in this dream world right next to each other, and they look really out of place and weird. Well, this was really similar to that, in that we're just going past, and there's these odd landmarks. Again, I'm not sure what that actually means. But yeah, very, very similar to the film Inception, which is right towards the end. And I've put, this was, so it was similar to that. I said how this was the point that I woke up, but I had an out of sync dream I'll mention next. So this is where this has happened at some point during the night. I can't think where necessarily this came in. But I'll mention this next. It has similar themes, and so I think could be connected with this underlying conspiracy. Something's being planned. As I said, there's something going on here with the police force. There's some sort of a conspiracy, there's a cover-up, or there's some sort of plans that are being built. That's what it very much felt like, okay? And I was sort of investigating, finding out what's going on here, yeah? So this dream is very, very different, but on similar themes. Okay, so there was a part here where the US president was being buried, and I'm pretty sure it was Trump, okay? His coffin was covered in silver foil, okay? Silver foil, random, right? Completely random. It wasn't like a silver coffin. It didn't look like a coffin. It was like somebody had got kitchen silver foil, tin foil, whatever you want to call it, and just wrapped it around and around and around and around, like you would do cling film or something, but wrapped it around, but with silver foil, okay? So it looked all very metallic, but it was very crumpled looking, you know, as far as this silver, because it wasn't like a proper silver solid coffin, okay? That's what it looked like. Yes, his coffin was covered in silver foil, and there's a large crowd that were assembled for this patriotic send-off, okay? While this coffin was being presented, which actually, as I said, yeah, didn't look like a coffin, but more like, I wrote here, yeah, more like the silver foil being wrapped around and around and around a body, like I've just mentioned, okay? And it kind of reminded me almost like a hot dog being rolled up in a foil, you know, to keep it warm, that kind of thing as well. As it had a silver foil look to it rather than just silver, and so it had creases in it, like I just mentioned. So next to where this was being presented to people, there was this guy standing on the top of a big lorry. So I'm going to describe this in a moment, but if you imagine, try and visualize this firstly. So you've got a crowd of people, they're looking straight ahead. We've got buildings behind us and around us, very tall buildings around us. And there's just this little bit of an opening. And in front of us, if you imagine like, you know, like a big truck has got obviously the main truck part, and then it's got its huge, what it's carrying, its load, yeah? So how it was positioned was that it was like the lorry bit, the actual lorry itself was facing us. So we saw, you know, the screen and the front grille and everything like that of the lorry. But then it's almost like it somewhat like jackknifed, you know, where it's the whole of this, well, not even like that actually. It was like it was disconnected. So that say the what do you call it? I can't even think of the word. You know, the big box bit, you know, that you put all of whatever you're carrying in it. That was side by side. So they were side by side, but sort of connected, somewhat connected, so that it was connected between the two because there's some sort of command that's given to it, and it changes. What basically happens? Yeah, I might be a bit out of sync here, but I'm going to just describe it as it was, okay? So what happens is there's actually a guy that's standing on the top of this big truck, this big lorry, and then you've got the, as I said, you've got the bit that it's carrying, and what happens is it's like a button's pressed or something, and it lifts up. So it's lifting up from the back, so it's tilting, and the actual coffin bit is in there somehow, and it's kind of tilted while this guy is standing on the top. Okay, hopefully that sort of visually makes sense as to what this looked like. Now I'm obviously going to be going through that now, so I'm going to be repeating myself, but I just wanted you to kind of try and visualize that. So yeah, next to where this was being presented to people, yeah, there was this guy standing on top of I put HGV, so heavy goods vehicle, which was directly next to where this coffin was coming from. This guy just started shooting at people. So he had like a sniper rifle, and he was shooting people in the crowd. And he shot 2 people to the side of me. I think he had taken a shot at me, but I'd sort of anticipated the fact that he was going to shoot me, and I moved out of the way. Not that I've got these phenomenal reactions, but it was just a case of I knew he was going to shoot me next because he shot like a person either side of me or something like that. And I just sort of move slightly, and he shoots, and it goes past me. Okay, so I sort of anticipated it and moved out of the way of the path of where this bullet would have gone. It would have been a headshot. It would have killed me. Okay, So this guy, so what he looks like, okay, so this guy looked like I always just use people that I can allow you then just to look up. Okay, so he looked like the balding guy from that 70s show, you know, is it called The 70s Show, That 70s Show, or 70s Show? I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like the dad that say, and he's got like hair that's just around there, you know, just around the back, but the rest of his head is completely bald. Okay, so he looked very much like that guy. Okay, and I felt like he was shooting suspects or something like that. I couldn't really understand. I don't know the circumstances as to how the president died in this dream either. Okay, so I don't seem to have written down this that kind of detail down, or I just didn't have a knowledge of that detail. But the shooter was standing on the driver's part of this truck, and immediately next to him was the trailer part of this truck. And this was the bit where the coffin was being presented. And the way it was being presented in this, in all honesty, was it felt like a trailer part of a bit like a dump truck, is what I put, like a dump truck, you know, that's carrying loads of sand and stuff, and it goes, doesn't it? It lifts it, and all the, you know, all the sand or whatever it's carrying flows down. It was very much like that. So it just kind of raised up, and then the coffin was kind of then visible. So it's almost like it was on top and people couldn't see it, and then it was kind of tilted, and then it was presented, I suppose, which wasn't exactly very glamorous, was it? You know, to be in this kind of somewhat like a dump truck sort of thing down. And again, also with this coffin that looks very temporary, you know, it's on silver foil, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it wasn't the best, being angled down. Yeah, horrible to say, but yeah, like a dump truck when it releases dirt out the back of the actual truck. Very similar to that. And even think that part was, yeah, I've put that part that it's tilting was maybe blue. I'm not sure, and I don't know whether that's relevant at all. Probably not. But as I mentioned, I didn't write that aspect down, but was because it was just a lot to write down, really. So I think it was blue, but I'm not 100% sure. I think what happened was, but the shooter actually ended up escaping. So it's fired on the crowd, loads of people, and then he kind of escaped up, you know, like the emergency exit on the side of, you know, very, very tall buildings. You've got those metal ladders, haven't you? And you sort of escape up that. He had, I think, escaped up these, which is a bit strange, isn't it? It's like, would somebody in the crowd not be able to get him, you know, before he, assuming sort of runs across or, you know, gets onto this building somehow? I don't know. I mean, oh yeah, I didn't even write the distance of how far away he was. I would have said, distance-wise, so if you see me looking out the window all the time, it's just me a way of gauging roughly how far distance is. I would have said he was probably around about 75 feet away, maybe a bit closer, 60 to 75 feet. I would say roughly is the distance he was away from us. And as I said, he's sitting on the top and he's just picking people off with his sniper rifle. Right. So yeah. So as I said, yeah, I think the shooter escaped up some emergency stairs, you know, that kind of ladder sort of thing, on the side of the building, which is a bit odd. You know, like how does that happen? How does somebody like that escape? It just seems a bit bizarre to me. I'm just going to pause for 1 second because, as you can hear, the irritating washing machine is going off in the middle of the video, but it happens so frequently. I'll pause it. I'll stop that so we don't have those kind of annoying bleeps in the background. Okay, we're back. Right. Sorry about that. I just have to often quickly run off because that would just be really distracting for you and for me, to be honest. So apologies for the bleeps. I had to find the right spot to sort of pause it. Right, so we're going to go into transparency. Is there anything that would have affected this dream? Anything that would have caused me to dream up this dream? Okay, so I put here, we have, you know, as in me and my wife have been watching quite a few different police series, investigating crimes, actually based in World War II, actually, as far as the time frame goes. And obviously this wasn't based on World War II at all, but obviously there was that aspect. In that series, there was a bit where someone's dad was a policeman, and they bent the rules to gain some leniency against their son. So that's where I'm seeing that little connection because of obviously some sort of a cover-up, potentially. Yeah. Um, sorry, I was looking then because someone was just delivering something. I am actually also expecting somebody to come round, so I was just thinking, oh, please don't be them. Right, so they could account for the whole crooked cops aspect, maybe. No idea why this falafel guy that I mentioned from Dark Knight was in it, or the 70s show kind of guy either. But Ollie did have a recent dream with a balding guy in it. Now, I mentioned that as being, where did I write that? That's in my TBC series. Now, I called it TBC, to be confirmed, purely because I didn't know what to call the series. And then I thought, to be confirmed, maybe I'll just leave it as that, because it's talking about future events. So maybe I'll just leave it as that. But it's in part 3, which is called 10 Kings. So you'll see a guy who's very similar to this person. So it's almost like, is that a key? Is that a key, maybe? As to, is this person that we're seeing here potentially this balding guy that's shooting people connected in some way to the 10 Kings? And that's talking about future, a future kingdom. So I'll have a little look to see what scriptures I mentioned in that video. But again, you're going to find them all listed on there anyway. The whole bit with Roxy Music, now utterly random. That is so random that I'm searching through the Bible, trying to find a serial killer, and I put in the word Roxy Music and it comes up. Now, I'm going to go into a bit of detail about that at some point soon. Yeah, I am going to go into a bit of detail about it, because I did look into it a little bit. Yeah, I will go into that. Maybe I'll start with that just so I don't forget. So I have absolutely no idea why Roxy Music came up. So specific. I mean, how specific is that? So specific. And I woke up with this real, very, very vague recollection of where I heard Roxy Music before. And I actually just Googled it and I was just looking, who are these? Who is this band, or who is this person, or whatever it is? And then I remembered actually that I had a song of theirs that was on a mix CD. So when I used to listen, when I was listening to dance music, it was one of the last tracks, and it was Angel Eyes by Roxy Music. And I thought, that's where I've heard it, isn't it? Angel Eyes, yeah, Roxy Music. So that's where I'd heard it. But that's it. It was on the end of a mix CD. Now I'm going to quickly just carry this conversation on around this, because I'm going into my thoughts, but I'm going to take us on a different route completely. But while we're here, I just want to mention about Roxy Music. Yeah, I think I will, just a little bit, just a little bit, and because I'm going to go back to it anyway. But Roxy Music, why did the band call themselves Roxy Music? Now the reason was it was actually the name of an old cinema, was called Roxy, I guess, and they had considered other names for the band. They'd considered Odeon, Ritz, Granada, and Regal, but they felt that Roxy had just it wasn't really a name that really meant anything. So, and they liked the sound of it. They said it was quite nostalgic, and then that's why they wanted to use Roxy. And they had to add music on the end because there was a US band, apparently, because they're a British band, Roxy Music. I think that's right, but I might be wrong there. But there was another band called Roxy as well at the time, and so they had to put music on there just to differentiate them, obviously because there was another band with the same name. But it means cinema. It's got cinema, okay? Now, I'm in the process of really considering whether I've got a theme that's going on here, because I'm getting lots of dreams that have cinemas in. I've already had quite a few dreams with cinemas in and stages, and I've noticed some more that are coming up. And the next one I'm going to go through, probably if this plan goes ahead, the next video I'm going to go through is probably going to have a cinema in it as well. And it's got very, very similar themes to this. So it feels like something's happening here with my dreams around cinemas. So obviously nothing that I'm thinking up, but there seems to be similar themes going on, because these are like months apart, a lot of these dreams, and sometimes even longer than that, and but there's a theme that runs through them. Anyway, moving on. So what are my thoughts? Right, so again, Roxy Music, park that for a minute. I do go through it, but we'll carry on. So yeah, I literally put my thoughts after this stream. Well, I'm a little lost as to what is going on with this one, but it felt in reading it back that maybe if you're looking in the Bible for a serial killer, what it made me think of was Satan, which is that somewhat obvious? I don't know. The entity that can bring about people's demise cannot be caught, because obviously we're looking for this serial killer, but we're not really any closer to finding them. And it made me think of a scripture. So it made me think of John 8:44. Wow, I've got a few John in. Very rare for me to get John in. Okay, so I wrote this down, I think. Yeah, it's John 8:44. I'll check it to see if, because all I wanted was a very specific part, but it says Jesus calls Satan a murderer from the beginning. Okay, and linking into that specific text, Jesus is speaking with the religious leaders and the Pharisees, and I wonder whether from there, this is one of the thought lines I go down. Okay, I wonder whether the police represent the law, as in the Bible, the law. Of Moses and stuff like that. Who's that enforced by? Well, it's enforced by the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all of these kind of guys. You see the law, obviously, as really being the Pharisees. I would have said more so in the New Testament. They're certainly mentioned a lot more, the Pharisees. But I wondered whether that's why the police were in there, was to highlight to me the law. Okay, so again, this is one of the thought lines I go down. So I went down a line of meaning to do with the body that we were discussing, it looked like a body that had a fake death. So you remember there was some pictures, like typical police thing you'd see with like pictures of dead bodies and stuff like that. This is something I was looking at when I was going through this file, investigating this serial killer. Okay, so I'm going through that and I'm looking at it and thinking it's a faked death because it doesn't look real. The blood doesn't look real to me, and I kind of made that kind of connection before that scripture. So before going down this line of Satan and the murderer and all of this kind of stuff, and I'd kind of thought the police representing the law, maybe they represented Judaism in some way, and that the Arabs coming in, so they're coming into the police, let's say, represented Islam, and that Islam was trying to associate themselves, let's say, with Abrahamic religions, Christianity and obviously Judaism, and that they were trying to align themselves. So because the Arabs were coming in, into the police force. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Which they don't belong to. I mean, again, we won't go into that, but that they don't belong there, in that they're not Abrahamic really at all, whereas Judaism and obviously Christianity is, and maybe that's why there was this lack of trust and stuff like that, them trying to align themselves and kind of saying, we've got that final revelation with, it's all part of this tradition, this, that's been going on for the last, 1,000 odd years, couple of thousand years, etc., all that kind of stuff. I was wondering whether that's what they were trying to do. They're trying to align themselves. Also, what further made me think of Islam was the covering of faces and just having, obviously, just that little bit that you could see, a bit like a burqa, I guess, sort of trying to belong, yeah. And plus that they both Judaism and Islam obviously deny the resurrection of Christ, of Jesus. And I wondered if maybe that had some sort of link to this body that they were claiming was dead, but I was claiming was alive, because what I was seeing there, I felt, was fake blood, in that, how do I want to word this? I'm trying to think how I want to word it. Just in a way that they were saying this person was dead, and I was saying, no, they're not dead. I believe they're alive. Okay, do you see what I'm going with that? Those two believe that Jesus was killed. Well, actually, no. In Judaism, let's say, they would not recognize him as being the Son of God. They would not recognize him as dying and being resurrected, because obviously that would mean that they're God. In Islam, they believe that God deceived everybody, and the person who was put on the cross was not Jesus, that somebody else did it, and that was all a deception, and that Jesus just returned to heaven but didn't die. I think it's something like that. Again, you'd have to look into that separately, but I think that's it. But ultimately, they don't believe that, neither of them believe that Jesus died and was resurrected. Okay. So that's where that kind of connection went. But again, hopefully you see where I'm coming from there, to a certain extent. But obviously it doesn't all fit. Not everything fits, together, but some aspects of it do, with that kind of line of thinking. So Roxy Music then. So that was so incredibly random, but interesting that I, a policeman of the law, was checking the scriptures for the identity of a killer. Because if I was the policeman and I was representing, let's say, those that are, let's say, Old Testament, let's say, because they don't believe in, obviously, again, Christ coming and stuff like that. So there is no New Testament in Judaism. It's just the Old Testament, because they don't see that as being true at all. So if I, as a policeman, am representing the law, yeah, I'm searching through the scriptures for the identity of the killer. Was interesting. But I felt that the killer was within the police force. So if we were to say that the police means Judaism, then not really sure what that means, as far as, other than, as far as, I couldn't know. When I was trying to think of treachery, let's say, and so I obviously thought of Judas, as a treacherous, as a Jew, that kind of thing. But obviously it wouldn't be regarded as a serial killer. So again, it didn't all match up. Then I was trying to think of, well, okay, look, I had my own friend, my old friend in there as Benjamin. Is there some kind of connection there? Why was Benjamin in there? Because it's completely random that he's in there. And I was trying to think of, right, well, who's like a well-known Benjamite then that this would match up with? Well, Paul was a Benjamite, and obviously he's massive in the New Testament, about, as far as how much of the New Testament is actually written by him. And I was thinking of other Benjamites. I believe that's Saul, isn't it? As in, like the first king, let's say, of Israel. Would be Saul, because they had judges before then, as kind of like somewhat ruling with God, etc. But they wanted a king, and so God gave them a king in Saul. But obviously he was massively flawed. And of course Paul was called Saul before he was renamed to Paul as well. But I was looking for some connections. I couldn't really find a connection. For the last part, obviously he talks about Trump and his funeral. At least I think it was Trump. I've had loads of dreams about Trump specifically. I've never had a dream about another US president, ever. It's always been Trump. So me seeing a funeral that's a US president, I'm pretty sure it's Trump. Okay, pretty sure it was. And I pretty much immediately thought of the significance of the silver foil. Okay, now I'm going to explain that to you. Why silver? Why silver? And this actually came to me pretty quickly. I was thinking, well, okay, I know where this is going. And it kind of links into that policeman thing and the Judaism thing, and all of that kind of links with this. Okay, so it very much made me think of the statue that's in Daniel. Okay, so in Daniel, you've got the statue, and I've mentioned this so many times now, that you've got the head of gold, which is the Babylonian Empire. Then the next one you've got is the Medo-Persian Empire, which is silver. Okay, I'll just stop there. I won't go through all the others. It's the Medo-Persian Empire. Well, who were the Medes and the Persians? Well, it was obviously a collection of two forces that came together actually to make that empire. But it was basically Iran sort of area, let's say. When you say Persians, most people will associate that with Iran. It was what Iran was called for a very long time before, in the 1970s, it was changed to be Iran. But yeah, Persians. This all comes back to I think the Greeks and stuff like that called them the Persians or something like that. Anyway, I won't go into all of that, but for me, it's Iran. Okay, Right. So we've got a connection there of Iran, potentially. We've certainly got silver. But the connection that I wanted to sort of make was, well, in that the Daniel statue, you have Cyrus, who's the Cyrus the Great, who's the ruler in the Medo-Persian Empire. And what does he do? Well, he actually reinstates the building of the temple. Okay, and for those to return to, they've been exiled, you see, by the Babylonian Empire and stuff like that, and they're basically allowed to go back and to worship, in Jerusalem, where the temple was going to be rebuilt. Okay, that made me then think of a Trump connection as well. Okay, because you may or may not be aware of this, but the Temple Institute, so the guys in Jerusalem, right now, have been obviously pushing for the temple to be rebuilt on Temple Mount now for quite some time. Okay, now when Trump got in, I'm not sure whether it's the first time he got in or the second time he got in, he one of the things that he said he was going to do, again, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe one of the things he said was that he was going to allow them to build the temple. Okay, or he was not going to stop them from building the temple, might be more accurate. I'm not really sure. But what the Temple Institute did is they minted a coin, a silver coin, and they minted that coin with the face of Trump and the face of Cyrus the Great, who is this same one that I'm talking about. And Cyrus was, again, the silver of the Medo-Persian Empire, but he was also the one that instituted the rebuilding of the temple, which is where they connect Trump, who is allowing that to happen, with obviously Cyrus, who was the one who made that happen as well. Okay, so that's the connection there. Hopefully you're seeing that connection. Certainly made me think of that big time. And also because of Trump is a builder, isn't he? He builds massive buildings and hotels and stuff like that, Trump Tower, all that sort of stuff. So he's seen as a builder. So he again matches a bit with Cyrus from that point of view as well, from their point of view. So it's like that combination of Judaism. So the Temple Institute, they are the guys in Jerusalem right now that are, let's say, the law as such, as how I've kind of described them. And you've got that connection there. Again, hopefully you're seeing that. I have no idea whether there's going to be some sort of a death of Trump, which is an assassination. But I found it very, very interesting that obviously that there was this guy with a sniper rifle shooting at people. Obviously, we've already had that with Trump before, obviously, where shot and missed, well, didn't miss necessarily. Again, people will have different opinions on that. Did it really happen, or was it some sort of publicity thing? I don't know. I don't really care, to be honest. It is what it is, Could this be something where there's a shooter this time who does actually hit? I'm not sure, because obviously in this dream, Trump was already dead in this scenario. He's in this kind of coffin thing, and you've got a shooter who's shooting at people. So I don't know whether he died of natural causes or anything like that. I have no idea. It's just, I'm pretty sure it was him, and he was wrapped in silver like this. Okay. Yeah, as I said, I'm not sure whether it was a shooter, but the guy was a white guy. It was balding, which was this, balding does have sort of symbolic meaning. I can't remember what it is, because of what they would do. You see, in if a nation was in mourning, what they would often do is they'd shave their head, and then they would be in sackcloth, which is just like a really horrible kind of clothing. This is in the Bible. It talks about covering themselves in ashes, but it was kind of like a showing to God that they were in mourning. Okay. And so this guy who's got this shaved head and just some hair around the side, I don't understand why I would ever think of that, and I've had this before as well, as I said, with this other dream with the 10 kings, which is a guy who I had a flash image, like if you imagine pitch black and then you see this image of somebody in your mind, and it was this guy who went kind of like that with his fists, and he had 10 sovereign rings on. And what does a sovereign ring mean? Well, I mean, you would have people who would have a certain like coat of arms or something like that, and you'd stamp it into the wax into a seal. so you knew that it came from them. So if you're opening a letter, you're seeing the wax seal. Oh, okay, that's from the king. I can see it's the king's seal, and then you would open it and know that that's been delivered. It's not been broken, that seal, so somebody hasn't looked at it when they shouldn't have looked at it. It's been delivered by the delivery person, without looking at it, and it's come from the correct source. And a sovereign ring is obviously showing power, sovereignty, kingship, let's say. And he's got all of them. He's got 10. Okay, so to me, that said the 10 kings. And again, I've made a video about it called the 10 Kings, which is in that TBC, to be continued, or to be confirmed, let's say, not to be continued, although maybe it will, I don't know. Maybe I'll need to add new parts to it. But it's part 3 that's called the 10 Kings, okay? And there's some interesting bits to do with that. Right, so is there anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, I looked up Roxy Music. So as I said, I was trying to figure out, like, why have I got Roxy Music in my dream? What's caused that? So I thought I'll look up Roxy Music. As I mentioned, I found that one that was called Angel Eyes. Well, that doesn't really mean anything to me necessarily. Obviously I've done that video that's called Angel Among Us. It's not quite the same, is it? So I don't quite know. And I was looking, I went through basically loads of music videos and trying to find something that maybe leapt out at me, or a title, or some of the lyrics that jumped out at me. The only one that kind of came up that kind of got my attention was one called, so obviously Roxy Music, called More Than This. It's quite a somber, quite a sad one. And I looked into the meaning as to, apparently it's about some sort of relationship breakdown. But if you look up the video, it's quite random. Right? It's not explaining it. It's all pitch black sort of screen thing with him singing with a light on him. And you've got a big bright cross in the background lit up. And so as soon as I started seeing that, I thought, well, this is the one. What's this all about? And then a little bit later, he's standing there singing and there's loads of flames coming up. So like depicting hell, I guess. But it's never really explained. It's very, very random. And I was trying to look up, again, because I'm Googling to find, what's this song really about then? And it's all about relationship breakup. Well, what's it got to do with heaven and hell? I was a bit confused because the symbology is quite clear. Again, watch it. You'll see what I mean. And so I came out of it a little bit like, I don't know what that means. What does Roxy Music mean? As I said, it could point to cinema because I've done some dreams which are to do with cinema, and there's ones called, I don't know if it's related to this, but there's one called Curtain Call series, which has got cinema in it. I've got lots of others. As I said, I'm wondering to put together some sort of cinema series, to be honest, and drop all these ones in just so if we can see some sort of connection that binds them all together. It feels like a lot of stage setting is what I sort of said. Is it feels like what does a cinema look like, or a stage? Well, it's what I'd seen in one of them was a stage setting. It was almost like I was seeing everything getting ready for something to happen. It's ready to happen, but it's not yet happened, because I was seeing the curtains drawn, and it's like we're waiting for the curtains to open. And that's why I call that series Curtain Call. It's a call to repentance and stuff like that. There's a call for, basically giving you a heads up that something big's going to happen. I feel like something big is going to happen, and then we're just at the point where it's just about to happen. And I didn't know whether this linked into that in any way, with maybe an assassination. Who knows? Maybe an assassination. Could it be an inside job? Because you've got the police here, they're covering stuff up. Could it be an inside job? Yeah. And there's been some assassinations in the past that may involve 3-letter acronyms, let's say in the US government agencies and stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know. Again, there's loads and loads of conspiracy stuff out there. Again, I don't have any opinion on that. Don't feel like it's overly relevant, but could it be to do with that? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. But certainly the silver aspect certainly linked me, I think, to Trump and the and Israel. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. Not sure. I'm really not sure. The 10 Kings was there an assassination, and it's somehow linked into the future 10 King kingdom that's in Revelation. I think it's Revelation. As I said, I'll see if I can find the scriptures. So very long video, and I suppose coming out of it, not really knowing 100%, but I think there's a lot of meaning in there, and I'm not quite there as to knowing exactly what it all means and piecing it all together, because there's a lot of bits there, especially the bits when we were driving past and there's all these different landmarks, and I was like, well, what's that all about? I don't really understand that part really at all. The police bit, again, not 100% sure. Cloud formations, again, I think it's deception. It relates to deceptions. Very interesting that I watched literally the film last night, Nope, that had these clouds in, and it was a deception. It was a fake cloud that was hiding a UFO. All right, I think, and that's actually what that bit of a spoiler, but Angel Among Us, that's what it's about. It is literally UFOs within clouds. Explain that to me. How do I watch that just as I'm about to go through this, and it's literally in this dream? I just watched Nope. I completely forgot about what it was all about, and that was last night. So it was one of the few dreams I haven't yet filmed, but I had a real press on my heart to actually do this one, because I do wonder. Oh, that was what I didn't mention. Sorry, there was something I didn't mention. So obviously this dream. Sorry, now I'm drawing this on a bit now, aren't I? Was 24th of November 2025, so quite some time ago. I'm not sure where we were with all the conflicts in the Middle East actually at that point, whether that had happened or not. But I was watching something in 18th of February 2026. I was watching just a news broadcast sort of thing, and it was talking about how, it said here, I just wrote down some speech marks. Trump tells Israel to prepare for war. So obviously the war is now actually happening in March, but this hadn't yet happened. And it also said in that particular broadcast that Iran was threatening to kill Trump. And then I was kind of like, hang on a minute, that's the Silver Nation. That's Iran, isn't it? Silver, Medo-Persians. And I was thinking, okay, so they're directly threatening to kill Trump. And I think they were talking about like sleeper cells and stuff like that within the country. And we've had a lot of violence in our country, in the UK, from people getting stabbed and stuff. And I've heard about lots of other nations which have had violence and stuff like that happening from, again, what they call these sleeper cells, people who've infiltrated the country, waiting for the opportune moment to actually cause some damage. So, yeah, maybe it's got those kind of aspects as well. Yeah, not sure. Yeah, not sure. Okay, well, hopefully that was interesting. Again, there's quite a few different dreams, a lot of dreams that link into this. So I'm going to kind of list all of those. I put obviously the link generally in the newer videos so that you can just highlight the link and then just take yourself straight to that video. But you'll find them within the playlist, obviously. I've got a season 1 playlist and a season 2 playlist, which will have everything. And then also you'll have the separate playlists for the individual series, like the Demonic Realm series, like the End Time series, the Call to Faith series, the To Be Confirmed series, Curtain Call series. There's loads of them. If I get a couple of dreams or more, I generally put them together, just make it easy so you don't actually have a recommendation that is one that's completely miles out of the series, because sometimes that does happen with YouTube. So I put them in a series, even if it's just 2 videos sometimes, just to make sure that you have them back to back. That's really all that's about. Okay, right, that's it for now. I'm going to go check out this other video and maybe film that. I may film that tomorrow now. But because I need to put it into the book actually first, I need to look through it and see where we're going to go with that. Okay, right, see you on the next one.